welcome to my channel. It's the day 5 of our book reading series named Reads with RACHANA, and I am so happy to have been releasing this series, and I am reading this awesome book Becoming by Michelle Obama, and I am in the first chapter of Becoming Me, and I'm going through the second part of this chapter. So till now we have been reading about our childhood, and mostly from what type of values and culture our family comes, and most about our family background as well. And I am actually liking this book, so I'm really excited to continue this journey. And if you like my contents, if you like what I do, I would like to request you to like, share and subscribe it to your friends and anyone related who is interested in contents like this. So without further ado, let's dive into it. Okay, so I am in the page number 39, so I'm continuing from the last paragraph of page number 39. Okay, here we go. If my questions for Dandy were hard and unanswerable, I soon learned that many questions are just that way. In my own life, I was starting to encounter questions I could not readily answer. One came from a girl whose name I can't remember, one of the distant cousin who played with us in the backyard of one of my great aunt's bungalows farther west of us, part of the loosely related crowd that often turned up when my parents drove over for a visit. As the adults drank coffee and laughed in the kitchen, a parallel scene would unfold outside as Craig and I joined whatever pack of kids came with those adults. Sometimes it was awkward, all of us managing a forced camaraderie, but generally it worked out. Craig almost always disappeared into a basketball game. I would jump double dodge or try to fall into whatever banter was going on. One summer day when I was about 10, I sat on a stoop chatting with a group of girls my age. We were all in pigtails and shorts and basically just killing time. What were we discussing? It could have been anything. School, our older brothers, an anthill on the ground. At one point, one of the girls, a second, third, or fourth cousin of mine, gave me a sideways look and said, just a touch hotly, "How come you talk like a white girl?" The question was pointed, meant as an insult or at least a challenge, but it also came from an earnest place. It had a kernel of something that was confusing for both of us. We seemed to be related, but of two different worlds. "I don't," I said, looking scandalized that she'd even suggested and mortified by the way the other girls were now staring at me. But I knew what she was getting at. There was no denying it, even if I had to. I did speak differently than some of my relatives, and so did Craig. Our parents had drilled into us the importance of using proper diction, of saying going instead of going and isn't instead of ain't. We were taught to finish off our words. They bought us a dictionary and a full Encyclopedia Britannica set, which lived on the shelf in the stairwell to our apartments, its titles etched into gold. Anytime we had a question about a word or a concept or some piece of history, they directed us towards these books. Dandy too was an influence, meticulously correcting our grammar or admonishing to us to enunciate our words when we went over for dinner. The idea was we were to transcend, to get ourselves further. They would plan for it. They encouraged it. We were expected not to just to be smart, but to our own smartness, to inhabit it with pride, and this filtered down to how we spoke. Yes, it could also be problematic. Speaking a certain way, the white way as some would have it, was perceived as a betrayal, as being a piety, as somehow denying our culture. Years later, after I would meet and married my husband, a man who is light skinned to some and dark skinned to others, who speak like an Ivy League educated black Hawaiian raised by white middle class Kansans, I would see this confusion play out on the national stage among whites and blacks alike. The need to situate someone inside his or her ethnicity, and the frustration that comes when it can't be easily done. America would bring back to Barack Obama the same question my cousin was unconsciously putting me to that day on the stoop. "Are you what you appear to be? Do I trust you or not?" I passed the rest of the day trying to say less to my cousin, feeling put off by hostility, but also wanting her to see me as a genuine, not trying to flirt some advantage. It was hard to know what to do. All the while, I could hear the trickle of conversation going on between the adults in the kitchen nearby, my parents' laughter rising easily and loud over the yard. I watched my brother in the flow of a sweaty game with a group of boys on the adjacent street corner. Everyone seemed to fit in, except for me. I look back on the discomfort of that moment now and recognize the more universal challenge of squaring who you are with where you come from and where you want to go. I also realized that I was a long way still from finding my voice. So, with this, we are completing the third part of this chapter. Let's go to the fourth part. I think it is also related to our childhood somehow, but it's good. At school, we were given an hour-long break for lunch each day because my mother didn't work and our apartment was so close by. I usually marched home with 4 or 5 other girls in tow, all of us talking non-stop, ready to sprawl onto the kitchen floor to play jacks and watch all my children while my mom handed out the sandwiches. This for me began a habit that has sustained me for a life, keeping a close and high-spirited council of girlfriends, a safe harbor of female wisdom. In my lunch group, we dissected whatever had gone on that morning at school, any beeps we had with the teacher, and any assignment that struck us useless. Our opinions were largely formed by committee. We idealized the Jackson 5 and weren't sure how we felt about the Osmonds. Watergate had happened, but none of us understood it. It seemed like a lot of old guys talking into the microphones in Washington, D.C., which to us was just a faraway city filled with lot of white buildings and white men. My mom, meanwhile, was plenty happy to serve us. It gave her an easy window into the world. As my friends and I ate and gossiped, she often stood by quietly, engaged in some household chore and not hiding the fact that she was taking in every word. In my family, with 4 of us packed into less than 900 square feet of living space, we never had any privacy anyway. It mattered only sometimes. Craig, who was thoroughly interested in girls, had started taking his phone calls behind closed doors in the bathroom. The phone's curlicue cord stretched taut across the hallway from its wall-mounted base in the kitchen. As Chicago school went, Brian Moore fell somewhere between a bad school and a good school. Racial and economic sorting in the South Shore neighborhood continued through the 1970s, meaning that the student population only grew blacker and poorer with each year. There was, for a time, in a citywide integration movement to bus kids to new schools, but Brian Moore parents had successfully fought it off, arguing that the money was better spent improving the school itself. As a kid, I had no perspective on whether the facilities were run down or whether it mattered that there were hardly any white kids left. The school ran from kindergarten all the way through 8th grade, which meant that by the time I had reached the upper grades, I knew every light switch, every chalkboard, and crack path of hallway. I knew nearly every teacher and most of the kids. For me, Brian Muir was practically an extension of home. As I was entering 7th grade, the Chicago Defender, a weekly newspaper that was popular with African American readers, ran a vitriolic opinion piece that claimed Brian Muir had gone, in the span of few years, from being one of the city's best public schools to a rundown slum governed by a ghetto mentality. Our school principal, Dr. Lavijo, immediately hit back with a letter to the editor defending his community of parents and students and deeming the newspaper piece an outrageous lie, which seemed designed to incite only feelings of failures and flight. Dr. Lavijo was a round, cheery man who had an afro that puffed out on either side of the bald spot, and who spent most of his time in an office near the building front door. It's clear from his letter that he understood precisely what he was up against. Failure is a feeling long before it becomes an actual result. It's vulnerability that's bred with self-doubt, and then it escalated, often deliberately, by fear. Those feelings of failure he mentioned were everywhere already in my neighborhood, in the form of parents who could not get ahead financially, of kids who were starting to suspect that their lives would be no different, of families who was their better off neighbor leave for the suburbs or transfer their children to Catholic schools. There were predatory real state agents roaming South Shore all the while, whispering to homeowners that they should sell before it was too late, that they would help them get out while you still can. The indifference being that the failure was coming, that it was inevitable, that it had already half arrived. You could get caught up in the ruin or you could escape it. They used the word everyone was not afraid of, ghetto, dropping it like a lit match. My mother bought into none of this. She would live in South Shore for 10 years already and would end up staying another 40. She did not buy into fear mongering and at the same time seemed equally inoculated against any sort of pie in the sky idealism. She was a straight down the line realistic, controlling what she could. At Moore, she became one of the most active members of the PTA, helping raise funds for new classroom equipment, throwing appreciation dinners for the teachers, and lobbying for the creation of a special multi-grade classroom that catered to higher performing students. The last effort was the brainchild of Dr. Lavijo, who had gone to night school to get his PhD in education and had studied a new trend in grouping students by ability rather than by age. In essence, putting the brighter kids together so they could learn at a faster pace. The idea was controversial, criticized as being undemocratic as all gifted and talented programs inherently are. But it was also gaining steam as a movement around the country. And for my last 3 years at Bryn Mawr, I was a beneficiary. I joined a group of about 70 students from different grades, set off in a self-contained classroom apart from the rest of the school with our own recess, lunch, music and gym schedules. We were given special opportunities including weekly trips to a community college to attend an advanced writing workshop or dissect a rat in the biology lab. Back in the classroom, we did a lot of independent work, setting our own goals and moving at whatever speed best suited us. We were given dedicated teachers, first Mr. Martinez and then Mr. Bennett, both gentle and good-humored African American men, both keenly focused on what their students had to say. There was a clear sense that school had invested in us, which I think made all of us try harder and feel better about ourselves. The independent learning setup only served to fuel my competitive streak. I tore through the lessons, quietly keeping tabs on where I stood among my peers as we charted our progress from long division to pre-algebra, from writing single paragraphs to turning in full research papers. For me, it was like a game, and as with any game, like most of any kid, I was happiest when I was ahead. I told my mother everything that happened at school. Her lunchtime update was followed by a second update, which I would deliver in a rush as I walked through the door in the afternoon, slinging my book bag on the floor and hunting for a snack. I realize I don't know exactly what my mother did during the hours we were at school, mainly because in the self-centered manner of any child, I would never ask. I don't know what she thought about, how she felt about being a traditional homemaker as opposed to working a different job. I only knew that when I showed up at home, there would be food in the fridge, not just for me, but for my friends. I knew that when my class was going on excursion, my mother would almost always volunteer to chaperone, arriving in a nice dress and dark lipstick to ride the bus with us to the community college or the zoo. In our house, we lived on a budget but didn't often discuss its limit. My mom found ways to compensate. She did her own nails, dyed her own hair, one time accidentally turning it green. And got new clothes only when my dad bought them for her as a birthday gift. She would never be rich, but she was always crafty. When we were young, she magically turned old socks into puppets that looked exactly like the Muppets. She crocheted dollies to cover our tabletops. She sewed a lot of my clothes, at least until middle school, when suddenly it meant everything to have a Gloria Vanderbilt swan label on the front pocket of your jeans, and I insisted she stop. Every so often, she would change the layout of our living room, putting a new slipcover on the sofa, swapping on the photos and framed prints that hung on our walls. When the weather turned warm, she did a ritualistic spring cleaning, attacking on all the fronts, vacuuming furniture, laundering curtains, and removing every storm windows she could Windex the glass and wipe down the sills before replacing them with a screen to allow the spring air into our tiny stuffy apartment. She would then often go downstairs to Robbie and Terry's, particularly as they got older and less able to score that as well. It's because of my mother that still to this day I catch the scent of pine sol and automatically feel better about life. At Christmas time, she got especially creative. One year she figured out how to cover our boxy metal radiator with corrugated cardbox printed to look like red bricks, stapling everything together so that we would have a fox chimney that ran all the way to the ceiling and a fox fireplace complete with a mantel and hearth. She then enlisted my father, the family's resident artist, to paint a series of orange flames on pieces of very thin rice paper, which when backlit with a light bulb made for a half convincing fire. On New Year's Eve, as a matter of tradition, she would buy a special horse basket, the kind that came filled with blocks of cheese, smoked oysters in a tin, and a different kind of salami. She would invite my dad's sister Francisca over to play board games. We'd order a pizza for dinner and then snack our way elegantly through the rest of the evening. My mom passing away trays of pigs in a blanket, fried shrimp, and a special cheese spread baked on rich crackers. Sorry. As midnight drew close, we would each have a tiny glass of champagne. My mother maintained the short parental mindset that I now recognize as brilliant and nearly impossible to emulate, a kind of unflappable Zen neutrality. I had friends whose mother rode their highs and lows as if they were on their own, and I knew plenty of other kids whose parents were too overwhelmed by their own challenges to be much aware of her presence at all. My mom was simply even killed. She wasn't quick to judge and she wasn't quick to meddle. Instead, she monitored our moods and bore benevolent witness to whatever troubles or trims a day might bring. When things were bad, she gave us only a small amount of pity. When we had done something great, we received just enough praise to know she was happy with us, but never so much that it became the reason we did what we did. Advice when she offered it tended to be the one of the hard-boiled and pragmatic varieties. You don't have to like your teacher, she told me one day after I came home spewing complaints, but that woman got the kind of match in her head that you need in your ear. Focus on that and ignore the rest. She loved us consistently, Craig and me, but we were not overmanaged. Her goal was to push us into the world. I'm not raising babies, she would tell us. I'm raising adults. Wow. She and my dad offered guidelines rather than rules. It meant that as teenagers we would never have a curfew. Instead, they would ask, "What is a reasonable time for you to be home?" And then trust us to stick to our word. Craig tells a story about a girl he liked in 8th grade and how one day she issued a kind of loaded invitation asking him to come by her house, pointedly letting him know that her parents wouldn't be home and they would be left alone. My brother had privately agonized over whether to go or not, till titillated by the opportunity, but knowing it was sneaky and dishonorable, the sort of behavior my parents would never condone. This didn't, however, stop him from telling my mother a preliminary half-truth, letting her know about the girl but saying they were going to meet in the public park. Guilt-ridden before he would even done it, guilt-ridden for even thinking about it, Craig finally confessed the whole home alone scheme, expecting or maybe just hoping that my mom would blow a gasket and forbid him to go. But she didn't. She wouldn't. It wasn't how she operated. She listened, but she didn't absolve him from the choice at the hand. Instead, she returned him to his agony with a blithe shrug of her shoulders. Handle it how you think best, she said before turning back to the dishes in the sink or the pile of laundry she had to fold. It was another small push out in the world. I'm sure that in her heart my mother knew already that he would make the right choice. Every move she made, I realized now, what was buttressed by the quiet confidence that she would raise us to be adults. Our decisions were on us. It was our life, not hers, and always would be. Wow, I love her mother. She's amazing. She's amazing. So let's do it here for today. And I am so fond of her mother. I mean, she is possibly one of the best, strongest mother I think I know for now. And I really liked one line that Michelle had mentioned here, that I'm not her how her mother said that I'm not raising you all to be, I'm not raising children, I'm not raising kids, but I'm raising adults. So that line said by her mother, I think that's one of the strongest statement I've ever heard. And I really think that it solely depends on whatever person you will become, also because of whatever environment you have grown in and whatever culture you have in yourself. So it solely depends on family, a lot of percentage, I think. So I can imagine why she is at this position today. from the family she has got. I think she is very, very lucky as well. So with this, I'm going to end it for now, and I hope you liked my video. Now I'm going to end this video. Thank you so much for staying till the end. Take care, and you guys are great. Thank you. Bye bye. See you.